That Was Yesterday podcast is brought to you by Define Mind and Body Wellness, my wellness center here in Glastonbury, Connecticut, where we specialize in holistic services to help shortcut the process so that you can see results fast, but learn to do it in a habitual way. So many of the topics we talk about are part of the program that our clients receive, except they get much more in-depth detail. Also, my workbook of the 10-week program to lose and never look back, which is only available to our patients at Define. If you are interested in holistic body fat spot reduction, or our pod to increase your metabolism, or our cold plunge, or our sauna, which is the best sauna in the world, and that I promise you, I know that sounds biased, but you'll see for yourself. Please go to definewellnesscenter.com. You will be prompted to put your information in and make sure to mention podcast when you do, as you will be eligible for a bigger discount on our introductory services because you are a listener. Appreciate you. Have a great day and enjoy today's podcast. What's up, and welcome back to another episode of the That Was Yesterday podcast. I am your host, Joe Carabase, and today we are talking about one of my favorite concepts that I've ever learned. And this is a concept developed by a gentleman named Peter Sims. He wrote a book called Little Bets. And basically what it means is anytime we want to do something different, like anytime you have a goal, you ever recognize like it's hard to do, right? Like it seems like this overwhelming monster or mountain that we have to climb. And oftentimes we can feel stuck. And so this concept is about breaking it down into small actionable steps. And so today I am going to share more about how you can utilize this concept to your specific goal that you're working towards right now. And I'm going to share a personal story on how I applied this. I might be a lot of things, but I preach what I practice. I practice what I preach. And this is a concept that I use to build Define. So, and before we get into it, just a heads up, on July 22nd from 6 to 7:30, we are about half full. I have a group hypnosis on overcoming anxiety to break emotional eating patterns. So that's on July 22nd, 6 to 7:30 at Define. Now, at Define, it's not in our typical entrance. There is a very top floor, so you actually go in towards the back set of stairs upstairs, and that is where we have been doing our group hypnosis. And so just a heads up on that. And then on July 31st from 6 to 7:30, it's about building your confidence and achieving your weight loss goals. And so these are going to be two powerful group hypnosis events. So if you're feeling somewhat stuck, or you can just use some sort of like a little bit of a push, or perhaps you find yourself just getting in your own way. And even with the concept we're talking about today, you just feel, like you can't move forward. This would definitely be a good opportunity. Go to neverlookbackweightloss.com. So that's www.neverlookbackweightloss.com. I believe it does still say sold out, just because our last events were sold out. There is, I know, space in each of these. I believe the first event's about half full, and then there's a little bit more space in the second event. But we only have 14 spots, and we do expect them to fill quickly. So if that is something you're interested in, just go there, let us know. You'll put your information in, and then someone from my team will reach out. All right, guys, enjoy today's show. So as I alluded to, Small Bets has made a profound impact on my life. Now, I call them small bets. A book Peter actually wrote, I say Peter because him and I are boys. He has no idea who I am. I don't even know what he looks like, but he had created a great book off of amazing concept. And again, I mentioned it quickly in the intro, but basically it's the idea of like the byline for his book is Little Bets, How Breakthrough Ideas Emerge from Small Discoveries. And so the idea here is that the limitations that we all feel and face are 99% of the time self-made. They're just in our head. They are perceptions and manifestations of our insecurities, and oftentimes there's always good reason to that. Like they're the parts of us that are afraid of whatever goal it is that we're chasing, that's creating the self-sabotage, is just trying to protect us. So it means well. These parts mean well. However, if you're looking to create change, that's creating a new identity in that change. And what it can be creating a business, it can be a weight loss journey. But the reality is, if you're looking to make a significant change, and up to this point, your system, your being, and I say system because it is your physical body, your mental body, your emotional being, is used to one set of ways, if this new thing that you plan to do is going to compete or at least feel like a competition or a death of an identity to the other parts of you that have been dominant for so long, then you're going to find resistance. And if you're new to this podcast, you're like, what the hell is this guy talking about with parts? I have a few episodes on it, but I'll give you a really quick, brief synopsis. There are two psychoanalysts back in the 1970s, Hal and Cesar Stone, who basically took the work of Carl Jung, who sort of recognized that within all of us there are shadows, there are things that follow us wherever we go, that unless we face, they're going to continue to create problems. And then he also talked about how there's a collective unconsciousness where there are archetypes. Like, yes, we are all unique and different, but we tend to follow under a certain type of archetype, and that archetype can change. He talked a lot about the hero journey, about how you go from, starting this challenge and facing adversity, and this whole circle of kind of like the overarching theme to any movie, right? Like there's the main character. He has this journey he's on. He's searching for an answer. He faces problems along the way. He makes progress. He falls back. Then he comes home as the hero and sort of shares what he's learned, right? It's just a beautiful concept. But anyway, Carl Jung was on the forefront of all of that. But what Hal and Cesar did was they recognized that within all of us, it was a little bit more unique than just archetypes, that there were parts of us, right? There's the pusher personality. There's the perfectionist, right? There's the anxious part. And that we are not these parts. These parts are just a part of us. But to each of these parts, they are almost like their own unique identities. Like when I do my work in hypnosis, whether in group or one-on-one, I literally can see an individual's physiology change, their facial expressions, their tone, their posture. Everything changes when a different part of them becomes active. And I know that this sounds kind of crazy at first, but think about it. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt very strongly about one thing, but then you felt this other energy inside that felt very strong in opposition? Or perhaps you kind of deviate between the two. Those are just two dominant parts at odds. And the other part, what I love about this work as well, is that it helps us objectify our emotions, which sounds really bad when I say that out loud, but especially as a guy who never really was taught emotional intelligence, this isn't part of the curriculum at school, and certainly boys are not naturally good at it. I mean, maybe some are, but most of us are not. This helped me because rather than this sort of wide open sea of possibilities of how do you speak emotional language, what I recognized through voice dialogue is that the emotions are a byproduct of the dominant energy. And that just allowed me to sort of understand it, almost as if I think about parts work as if almost like we're detectives. And if you ever watch a detective show, there is, he has a board where he's like, okay, this is the main boss. Like imagine he's trying to chase down a mafia boss. This is the main boss. And under this boss are the other capos. And under the capos are the soldiers. And if you're not understanding this lingo, it's just mafia jazz. But really you get the idea is that they're trying to connect all the dots, all the pieces, all the players involved, all the evidence that they have up to this point. And that's exactly what we got to do with the mind. I call it mind mapping, but we live in such a busy, crazy world that if we're not slowing down and sort of recognizing what momentum, what energies are sort of momentumly pulling me forward or pushing me back, then we don't have control of our lives. You don't have control of your life if you're not stopping in on that. And look, knowing all this stuff, it happens to me as well. I have to regularly check in with myself. I always say I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'm always this close away from that energy taking over. But the important thing is awareness. And so in any event, that's what I mean when I talk about parts. And there's no stronger part when you're starting a new goal than self-sabotage. And that can encompass a lot. And again, the problem is that oftentimes self-sabotage takes truth and it just projects it even more. So there's oftentimes good reason to it. So it's easy to rationalize, especially when it's backed by or covering an insecurity, right? So how does small bets come in? Well, it's like, all right, if this is the thing, and basically really what it is exposure therapy, right? You're exposing yourself to small, actionable, bite-sized pieces that move you closer to the thing. So let me explain how this actually works in real life. As many of you guys know, I own Define Mind and Body Wellness. Now, long story for a different day as to how I came up with the Define name, but that was actually happened on a reality show years before. So maybe we'll get into that another time, or you can ask me about it if you see me in person. But nonetheless, I had this concept for sort of recovery, but it wasn't really something I wanted to pursue. And I happened to be bodybuilding at the time. I was in the middle of prep, and I had a close friend told me about the power of like really high concentration spot reduction. He's like, you should try it. And he was getting into starting his own sort of practice with it. And I was very doubtful at first because in exercise and diet, there is no such thing as spot reduction. Like you can do all the sit-ups in the world, you're not going to spot reduce your stomach. However, this technology was supposed to do that without any downside. Like, it just sounded too good to be true. So finally, it wouldn't go away, and I kept learning more. And I read, I saw how there's over 50,000 clinical studies, and certain there was one brand of machines of which we ended up purchasing that had an FDA clearance to guarantee spot reduction, which is very hard to get in the FDA. They're so loose about other things, but not when it comes to anything related to, fat loss and weight loss. When it comes to actual services, because so much it's one thing to have a supplement, but as you can imagine, people can take things and get carried away with services. So in any event, I tried it. I lost a half inch, and I was already very low body fat percent. And so I did it again and saw it wasn't a spoof. And so I was like, okay, this sounds really good, but this machine is like almost $40,000. And I was coming from a place where I had sold my last gym a year earlier, and we had just moved up to Connecticut, just bought a new house, had a 1-year-old. My wife was pregnant with our son, and I had started and grown a online coaching business in between my gyms because it was kind of a natural integration. I was remote, and I love helping people, obviously, and that's what I had. But I just, there's a lot of output in terms of financial with all other things. And then the coaching thing was up and down, right? So it wasn't like I just had money like ready to rock. And I knew that if I was going to make a decision, I had to make a good decision because I have people depending on me who don't even know they're depending on me yet, right? A baby inside of my wife, and then of course my daughter. And so, you don't want to just jump into things, but this is where I feel like a lot of men, particularly my age and older, go wrong, is because there are risks, serious risks, and you got to consider that. You can't be irresponsible. And look, there's no guarantee in anything. Now, my argument would be like, there are certainly risks in not doing something, but there also are probably a lot worse risks if you don't do the thing you want to do, depending on how important it is for you. But that's a different topic. In any event, I was like, you know what? I reached out to the company that had the FDA clearance, and I said, hey, this is what I'm considering. I want to do a 2-week trial. I'll pay fair value, like whatever it is, the investment. I want to try it for 2 weeks. I want to run enough people through it. I want to make sure that this is legit. It's not a one-off here and there. It doesn't just work on me as a bodybuilder. Like, I want to test it. And if this is something that works, then I'm going to buy one. And I'd like to, we worked out a deal after. And so that's what I did. And it wasn't cheap, but the good thing is if I kept it, I could put that towards my payment. And the other thing is that, I would have, if I didn't like it, I'd have to send it back and pay for the shipping. Was crazy and all these things. But it was like, all right, well, this is one fraction of the price compared to just going balls deep into the whole thing without knowing. So that's what I did. And then in terms of an office space, I was like, again, similar idea. It's like, what is a small bet here? How can I start small and prove this and figure this out? Because I find with every new business and really any project, really any art, it could be any, not that I'm an artist per se, but like I can imagine it's the same process for all things. Whereas like you start on this journey, but you let it sort of tell you what it is as you go. But the only way you're going to get to find out what it is if you take the steps forward to put yourself in a position to see. I really believe in the uncollective, we talked about the unconscious collective, or the collective unconscious, where there's, as the way I understand it and really see it as and witness in my own life, that when you are searching and when you are open, there are answers to all of your problems. There are answers to all your solutions. There are answers to the things that you've been struggling with, but you have to slow down. You have to be receptive. You have to be open. And most importantly, you have to take action. Otherwise, it's almost like your universe rewards action, right? That's sort of the best way to put it. And that's the idea of the small bets, right? Did that with the machine, right? So then what do we do with the office building? Well, I didn't want to take out a big lease. It was coming off of COVID with at the time of COVID at 1.3 gyms, which, COVID was hard for a lot of industries. Gym industry suffered significantly, right? So I had a lot of risk tied up there that did I want to get back into that, not knowing exactly what I was getting into, right? That was the question. What's the small bet? Well, I could rent a single office and there's no contract, and I can run my services and make sure that it works the way I want it to work and develop the right protocol and program along with it. And that's what we did. Started with one office, one employee, then very quickly 2 offices, then very quickly 3 offices, and like 4 or 5 employees. And it became clear that this needed something else. This proved, and now it's time to level up. And I had this vision of a recovery center, of like a wellness center / recovery / weight loss transformation, like all these things that I've done over the years. And I had the aesthetic in my head, but I didn't know what the aesthetic was going to look like. But again, like in looking at spaces, it was like what made the most amount of sense with the amount of growth. And, and that's what we did. And when we moved into our current space, which is, it's a big facility, it looked like crap. It needed a lot of work. But again, the vision unfolded, and we started with 1 machine, and very quickly to 2 machines. We moved to the place. And we didn't have any pods. We didn't have fire and ice. I did have hypnosis. We didn't have a lot of the things that we have now. And so that's just an example for you right there. Now, there's nothing like magical about my story other than the fact that this was a mission of mine to help people with, a concept that I was testing. And I worked extremely hard at researching and learning. And I'm not saying this to blow smoke up my ass. I'm saying it because sometimes for some people, self-sabotage can be like, oh, well, it's easy for you, or, we tend to put people on pedestals. And I don't want you to do that to me, because I was just as lost as anyone would be, not knowing what they were going to do next, But again, you just got to tune inward and listen to what you feel is best, and then find out, okay, how can I expose myself to this thing without going full on in and having serious consequences, right? Like what can I do to get an idea if it will work? And so, there's another principle called minimal viable principle, which is what is the least I have to do to get the best possible result? I talk about this all the time to people about exercise. People think it has to be this 60-minute workout or 45-minute or 30 minutes of high intensity. It's no. Right? If I'm talking to people, my question is always well, you tell me, how many times you work out the last 30 days from now? Most often, it's not even half of what they're about to tell me they're going to do starting Monday. I'm no, that makes no sense. In no world does it make sense to make that level of a leap, right? So why don't we just do this instead? Why don't we start, and find that minimal viable that you can do that's going to give you enough to feel good. And by the way, when it comes to exercise, legitimately, it sounds ridiculous, but it's not. 5 minutes of exercise will make you feel better. It just will, right? Just as deep breaths, by the way, 6 deep breaths will make you feel better. So minimal viable, right? And earlier I mentioned exposure therapy. So that's kind of the same concept where it's for example, you might have, for instance, I worked with a guy, one of my coaching clients who, was getting into dating, and I've had several men who have had this, both young and old, because again, it's not these are things that we just take for granted, but confidence is something that once you sort of you have one thing that's you're not exactly thrilled about or you're not certain about in your life, your confidence could be exploited, right? A lot of these men were successful, did well at their jobs, or did well at different, sports, different aspects of their life. But when it came to dating, they had this shyness. So what we did eventually, we didn't even start with them doing any of that stuff. We started internally, right? We went through this whole process internally. But once I got them to a baseline, it was like, all right, look, now this is the game. Like I want you to, when you go to a store, grocery store, wherever, I want you to talk to guys and girls, just get into conversation, no expectation. Don't be creepy, of course, but just start talking to people who you don't know. And, try to not be awkward, right? Try to, you'll find your voice is really what you're doing. Then once you have enough of those conversations, then, I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but we went through this whole process, right? And he absolutely, like, it works every time when the person does it, right? I'll share another story here quickly before I let you go with myself. Like, those you guys who grew up in the 90s like I did and knew of or maybe watched like I did, WWF wrestling at the time, now WWE. Well, there was this moment where Macho Man Randy Savage was tied up into the ropes and Jake the Snake had his snake out there and he took it out, and that thing bit it wasn't uncommon for the snake to come out, but this thing bit Macho Man, and you heard interviews after, it wasn't supposed to be as hard as it was. Apparently, Jake beat up the snake or something before, legitimately abused it or didn't feed it, and that snake was pissed. And it was you can say wrestling's fake all you want. There was nothing fake about this. I don't know how this man did this, and Macho Man's just freaking out, tied up, right? But anyway, I had this image as a kid ingrained in my head. Not to mention, there is something said. We talked about archetypes, collective unconsciousness. There's a reason why most of us are afraid of snakes, right? And that goes all the way back to biblical myths. If you think about all the uses of snakes that are involved there's a reason why a lot of us are generally afraid of heights. These are things that are passed into us, almost like knowledge and wisdom of hey, these things can really bite you, right? Or they can be dangerous. In any event, I know not everybody is, but again, these are, most people are. So for me, I was like, I got to get over this. And then look, I'm not fully over this, I'll be honest, but it's because I didn't keep up with the sort of, plan. But basically, when I was in Florida, I started learning. I was like, all right, I got to just go hold the snake because something I had to do. I don't know. I oftentimes do these things and they don't go anywhere in terms of they're not for any real reason other than it's something I feel like I have to do. And if you're looking at it from an outcome based thing, you're like, why did you do that? Or why are you doing that? And sometimes I would even do that with certain things. But then when you go forward and you look back, you see, oh, well, that led to this and that led to that and blah, 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 whatever. So I had a client, Lisa, who's awesome, back in Florida, Tequesta, and she worked at one of the zoos down there. And I told her we were talking about this, or maybe she heard. I don't know. I forget how. Maybe she suggested it to me. I don't even know. But I was like, all right, well, what okay, I can hold the snake, but I'm not ready for that yet. When I see a snake sliver, his actions, his movements, all of it just makes me uncomfortable, to be honest. So I spent some time researching why snakes do that, what they do. And I don't remember all of it, but I do know I was a lot more than I had known. And that's the thing, really, when it comes to doing things oftentimes. And by the way, what I'm about to say can also be something that weighs you down, which is oftentimes we're scared of what we don't know, right? In this case, it was with snakes. But the thing you have to be careful of, especially in entrepreneurial endeavor, I see it all the time in weight loss, is this procrastination or paralysis by overanalysis of trying to get it all perfect. And that again goes back to the small bet or little bets, as Peter titled his book, which is what is a small thing you can easily do to test its efficacy if this is something you're going to pursue more. For us at Define, we have our introductory appointments that are 10 minutes, but we measure before and after. Why? Because we want to see how responsive you are so we can speak with more confidence that you're going to get the guarantee you came in for. And so I hope all of that stuff makes sense. Oftentimes what can make sense conceptually can be hard to practice. And when that happens, just know it's not because you're weak. It's not because you're stupid. It's not because you're fat. It's not because you're lazy. It's none of that. It's just that there's likely a blockage in you. The part of you that wants to move forward is probably coming from a sort of powerless position in that there are other more dominant parts of you sort of overriding it. And I see this all the time. And by the way, this can, even at my group hypnosis, I've had I had a patient, for example, who came to one of my group hypnosises, and she's like, Joe, I didn't feel anything. And we started talking through it, and very evident. I was like, holy crap, like, well, it's just your protector. Like, she had a very strong protector. And so we ended up doing one-on-one work. And 3 sessions later, like, she's a different woman. Like, we're talking like, I don't, I don't know that anybody would identify her, but she had a lot of stuff going on, things that you just wouldn't, you know, that you don't just blink at, right? Like, these are serious things from a young girl, all the way through, and her bravery and courage to face all of that is amazing, and actually take actions, right? But again, she had that blockage up front, and it's because of all that she's been through, and that's not uncommon. When we have trauma, it creates blockage because our psyche can only handle so much, So, I recommend to people, look, if you are interested in hypnosis, a really good, easy way to test it out will be the group hypnosis. Now, for most people, everybody will be hypnotized, but if you're going to want to experience something, you can't have something blocking you there. And sometimes, this is why I tell people, like, if you're not even open to it working, then don't show up, because it just won't, nothing you go into that with that attitude is going to work. But if you go into the right mindset but find that there is something blocking you, that's also very telling, right? Whether or not we work together, there's something blocking me. Now there's something you can look at versus just standing there like stuck and blaming yourself. Because I can tell you, it's often not lack of effort. It is not lack of skill. It's not lack of knowledge even. So like, look, what you should be doing more than you're not, right? Like, at least some things we all do. So if there is something blocking you, or if you're ready to start training your mind, then I would love to see you at the group hypnosis. It's www.neverlookbackweightloss.com. Always hit me up on Instagram as well. Let me know if this resonated. And if it did, please share with friends. That always helps. Thanks so much.